Chef AJ, and this is where I introduce you to amazing people like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. My guest today has been on the show before. His name is Dr. Andrew Klonecke. He's local up here. He's been a doctor almost 50 years, and he's written this wonderful new book called Bypass. I'll link to it below in both the chat and the show notes. We're going to be talking about the book, but first he's going to give a wonderful presentation that he's given in medical schools. By the way, if you haven't seen his previous episodes, he makes the world's best zucchini muffins. You'll have to check that out. But the presentation he's going to be giving in just a moment is about the role that nutrition and health has in preventing and reversing chronic disease. Please welcome Dr. Klonecke back to the show. What have you been up to since your last appearance on Chef AJ Live, which I think was July of last year?
Could be, yeah. Well, babysitting grandkids, babysitting son's dogs, gardening. We went to Japan on
Hey everyone, and welcome to Chef AJ Live. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and this is where I introduce you to I don't know what's happening with this.
Babysitting grandkids, babysitting son's dogs, gardening. We went to Japan on
Everyone, and welcome to Chef AJ Live. I'm your host, Why does that keep happening? Sorry about that. I don't know what's happening with this.
Babysitting grandkids, babysitting son's dogs, gardening. We went to Japan on
and welcome to Chef AJ Live. Why does that keep happening? Sorry about that, Dr. Klonecke. I'm trying to multi-stream, and this is what happens. Dogs and kids. If you babysit dogs, I have a dog.
Oh, gosh. Like my neighbor said, oh, you've got your grand dog. And I said, yeah, he's going home tomorrow, thank God.
That's funny, because you don't actually have a dog, so.
We do not have a dog. We've been there, done that, and that was good when it lasted. So
nice. Well, are you enjoying your retirement or semi-retirement?
Yes. Well, yes, but I'm kind of a people person, so I do miss the people, and that's really the only thing that I miss. And I guess when I retired, my thought was that my most precious commodity at this point in my life was time, and I had less of it, so I better get about what I wanted to do. And of course, writing a book was one of the things, and I've also tried to relearn how to play the piano, which is going, but a little bit slowly. And I think my wife Kathy was excited to have me spend more time at home, although the first couple of months she had to keep reminding me that I was not her boss, and I was not the manager. But after we got over that, everything's been fine.
That's funny. It must have been an adjustment, because I know that working at home, I'm used to my husband going out. Now we both work at home, and sometimes I wish he would just go out,
Yeah. Don't you have something to do?
That's funny. That is funny. I love it. Have you ever thought about like having a second career as a plant-based doctor?
No, I'm content doing the lectures at the medical school, and there's also a fellow in town, an Indian fellow by the name of Gopal Kapoor. You may or may not have met him, but he has a 503c corporation, Family Green Survival, and he does a lot of fundraising to provide food for hungry families. And his foods are probably 99% plant-based. So I do some stuff with him. I've presented with him at the Rotary, and I guess I'm on his board, although he doesn't seem to need me for much advice, except every now and then. So I don't think that I would want a regular gig, just because we get called to do stuff intermittently, and I wouldn't be able to do that with a regular gig. Although one of the things I've also been doing is I thought, since I majored in chemistry in college, I might want to substitute teach chemistry either at high school or the local junior college. But in preparation for that, I bought a general chemistry book, which is now 900 pages long and costs $345. And I'm surprised that you'd think that in chemistry everything would stay the same, but no. Now quantum physics has been applied to chemistry, and things are slightly different, but it's been interesting.
Cool. I love that you're making great use of your retirement. What medical schools do you lecture at?
Mostly just at Cal North State, which is down in Elk Grove.
Oh, nice. I didn't know we had a medical school up here.
It's a private medical school as opposed to like UC Davis.
Nice. Are you doing anything at Kaiser?
I am not, no. Although I've kind of thought about it. Other than, I've written some letters and bugged the physician administrators about being more plant-based. I've not done anything within the facilities itself.
Nice. Well, it sounds like you're keeping busy.
Absolutely. I have to write myself a note at night as to what I did. And I go, oh my gosh.
Well, great. Well, I can't wait to see your presentation.
Okay. Should we share?
Share screen.
Start away? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see if I can do this. Okay. Did I make it?
Yeah, it's just you want to change the mode, you know what I mean? To not see your slides on the left if you can.
Okay.
Just going to like either
Uh,
either a slideshow, maybe go to slideshow
yes.
or click
If
from
I
start. I see slideshow there. It's two more over. One more over is slideshow.
there.
Yeah, one more to the right.
Okay, it's kind of hidden by the oh, there we go. Oh, wrong one.
It can be played from start or you've hit the
There
slideshow.
we go.
There you go.
There we go. All right. Now
Perfect.
we're live. Okay, well, very good. Okay, so all righty, nutrition and health. And certainly I think diet is one of the things that has a significant role in both preventing and reversing chronic disease. I think my last 5 years in practice, I focused on lifestyle medicine, and I did become board certified in lifestyle medicine because I don't think that we put enough emphasis in medicine on how lifestyle affects, our health. We just went through this coronavirus, this COVID epidemic, and it was a big deal about all the people that died from COVID. So in 2 years, a little over 5 million people died from COVID. But at the same time, 34 million people died of heart disease. Another 30 million died of strokes. So that's almost 50 million people that died of vascular disease. Almost 10 million people died of cancer, or I'm sorry, almost 20 million, and a little over 8 million people died of diabetes. And we certainly haven't had the same response to these deaths that we had to the COVID deaths. And by the way, a lot of the people who died of COVID had these same underlying predisposing conditions: vascular disease, cancers, and diabetes. So it was probably even worse than these statistics would say. There was a physician by the name of J. Michael McGinnis who analyzed why people died early. So their definition was if you died before age 80, that was early death. And the green bars represent what they found in 1990, and the gold bars what they found in 2010. And in 1990, the leading killer was tobacco. But by 2010, 20 years later, tobacco deaths had fallen, and the leading cause of early death was related to diet and exercise activity. That killed more people early than all the other causes to the right of that combined. So the question that you'd have to ask yourself is, if diet is a problem, what parts of the diet actually cause the issue? And if you look at cancer and heart disease deaths around the world, and you look at what people eat in those countries, there's a trend that emerges. The green bar represents the percentage of calories from unrefined plant foods. So that means anything above the green bar, those are calories that come from either animal foods or refined foods. So in the United States, we eat over 85% of our food is either refined or animal protein. And our likelihood of dying early from heart disease and cancer is almost 80%. Whereas if you compare that to some of the Asian countries where most of the food is either plants or is not refined, their likelihood of dying early from these diseases are very, very low. And it's not because we don't spend the money, because we do. The dark purple line represents how much we spend per capita in the United States on healthcare. And it's significantly more than any other country. And when you look at survival, the lilac line, we don't really get what we pay for. You know, the Japanese live a good 5 years longer than we do. And the Cubans, who spend 1/10 as much as what we do, are, live just as long. So it's not a matter of the money. And in fact, we may have to spend that much money because we have a lot of sick people in this country. If you look at the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development data, which looks at the health outcomes in 34 countries, Europe, Turkey, Israel, North America, Japan, Korea, we in the United States have the second highest incidence of chronic disease. There's 22 countries that have less cardiovascular disease, 31 countries have less diabetes, 27 less prostate cancer, 28 less breast cancer. We do lead in one category. We are actually the most obese of all, and 27 countries live longer than what we do. It's kind of interesting. About 15 years ago, I read the China study by T. Colin Campbell, and this graphic really touched close to home. It talked about heart disease death rates for men aged 55 to 59. I think I was 61 at the time. And the relationship between consumption of animal protein and heart disease death rate was almost 1-to-1, looking at 20 different countries. The more total calories coming from animal protein, the more likely that you are going to die early of heart disease. So you kind of wonder, the question you want to ask is, what actually causes vascular disease? I call it atherosclerosis, but we're going to talk vascular disease, heart attacks, and strokes. And it seems like the underlying cause is endothelial dysfunction. Now, the endothelium is what lines our arteries, and it can kind of take care of itself. It actually does so by releasing a chemical called nitric oxide. And nitric oxide prevents the buildup of plaques. It's anti-inflammatory, and it promotes vasodilation. It keeps our arteries open fully. But when there's endothelial dysfunction, we get decreased production of nitric oxide. And this endothelial dysfunction is mostly fat-induced. You can measure it after a fatty meal. The arteries are less likely to respond to stimuli that would otherwise cause more dilatation of the blood vessels. The decreased production of nitric oxide also leads to more platelet adhesion and consequently coagulation, so that you can get clotting within the blood vessels. Once the endothelium begins to dysfunction, the vessel wall can be attacked by low-density lipoprotein cholesterol, the bad cholesterol. And once the cholesterol is there, this sets up progressive inflammation within the vessel wall. There's cells that are brought into this area to digest the cholesterol. They produce foam cells, and now you've got buildup of plaque. One other factor involved in vascular damage and in vascular disease is trimethylamine oxide. This comes from the ingestion of red meat and ahi tuna. The carnitine is metabolized by bacteria in our guts, producing trimethylamine. It gets absorbed, goes to the liver, oxidized, and then this enters the damaged vessel walls increases inflammation as well as the macrophage migration, and eventually you get plaque rupture or calcification. So when we talk about inflammation, I know this is a very, very busy slide, but I want to point out a couple of things. Acute inflammation is important. If we get a cut or there's some sort of tissue damage, the body responds in a certain way, and it releases these chemicals which create an acute inflammatory reaction. Like, say, if you get a cut on your arm, you might notice that there's redness, some swelling, some exudate. But once the damage is healed, usually there's resolution of inflammation. But if you enter a situation in which there's chronic inflammation, then all these things on the bottom 2/3 of the side are released into the system. And these are chemicals that can be harmful to normal tissue, particularly on the far left. ROS and RNS are reactive oxygen species and reactive nitrogen species, and they can damage DNA, causing mutations, which is actually the start of cancer. But all of these chemicals in this inflammatory microenvironment can lead to progression and spread of tumors once the damage has occurred. These mutations that we talk about as the very start of cancer can happen by chance, but usually the body knows how to correct that. But they can also can be formed due to chronic inflammation. And chronic inflammation, we've seen, can be caused by diet, heme iron and red meat, too much fat, high heat cooking. But there's other things that can produce the free radicals as well. Lack of exercise, smoking, stress, pollutants, infections, radiation. And so these mutations can be of all different kinds. It can be a mutation that cancels the proofreading function, allowing more mutations to be made. It can be a mutation that stops making the proteins that halt cell proliferation, and now tumor cells can grow unhalted. Or it can produce proteins that prompt cells to grow in the absence of the usual stimuli. Or it can allow mutated cells to separate, spread, and put down new blood vessels, what we call angiogenesis. How do you prevent beginnings of cancer? Well, it's all about avoiding the oxidative stress from the excess free radicals. Now, a free radical is a molecule capable of independent existence, but with an unpaired electron. Atoms to be stable need to have paired electrons in their shells, particularly in the outer shell around the nucleus. So if there's an unpaired electron, this molecule is highly reactive and unstable, and it wants to get or give an electron so that it has an even number. And the easiest targets are either lipid, I mentioned the oxidized LDL cholesterol earlier, or DNA, which produces a mutation. Now, free radicals are important when we have an infection, but it's only a problem if there's an imbalance. Now, the cells do have a safety net that can repair DNA, but if it's overwhelmed by any of these sources, pollution, toxic chemicals, cigarettes, ingesting red meat, high-fat foods, high heat cooking of meat, then all of a sudden now you're at risk for mutations. Switching over to diabetes a little bit, it's important to know how the cells usually accumulate glucose for their metabolism. Insulin is what unlocks the cell so that the glucose channel gets opened. So when insulin hits the cell receptor, the channel usually gets opened. But in type 2 diabetes, even when insulin hits the cell, the glucose channel stays closed because the mitochondria inside the cell, the furnace of the cell, has been sated by free fatty acids. And it says, hey, I'm full, I don't need any glucose. So what happens is the cells become resistant to the effects of insulin. Liver, muscle, and fat cells no longer take up glucose. So glucose stays in the blood vessel, and all of a sudden now you've got high blood sugar. And as I mentioned already, it's caused by elevated saturated free fatty acids going into the cell and causing the glucose transport system to be closed. And the free fatty acids come from two sources. One, the ingestion of saturated fats, and number two, the conversion of excess refined sugars to free fatty acid in the liver. And by the way, even worse than refined sugar is high fructose corn syrup, which is converted into free fatty acids at a rate 7 times faster than glucose. So when the body notices that there's excess sugar in the bloodstream, it starts releasing more and more insulin. And now this is problematic because while insulin is good to get glucose into cells, increased insulin production also causes increased oxidative stress and therefore more free radicals. It's pro-inflammatory. It contributes to endothelial dysfunction, and it causes hypertrophy or overgrowth of the coronary vascular smooth muscle, which just contributes to the narrowing of the arteries. So looking at these 3 diseases, we can see that there's some common factors involved in all of those: inflammation, saturated fats, refined sugars, endothelial dysfunction, free radicals, TMAO, and insulin resistance. So if we're going to construct a healthy diet, we have to construct a diet that actually counters these negative influences. So we need to avoid pro-inflammatory foods and increase anti-inflammatory foods. We have to decrease our intake of saturated fats. We have to avoid added sugars. We have to avoid foods causing endothelial dysfunction. And this is basically avoiding fat, especially expelled oils, canola, coconut, olive oil, any expelled oil. And we have to increase our antioxidants in the diet to fight any possible mutations that the body hasn't corrected on its own. We have to avoid foods that lead to the production of trimethylamine, red meat, ahi tuna, egg whites. We have to increase our intake of fiber. Fiber lines our intestines and keeps toxins and bacteria from entering the system. Fiber slows the absorption of carbohydrates, decreasing insulin release. And remember, too much insulin is harmful, as we noted on a previous slide. And fiber promotes growth of beneficial bacteria. And when we have beneficial bacteria, these produce small chain fatty acids, which are actually anti-inflammatory. And the more fiber we have in our intestine, satiety is promoted. We feel fuller, and we will consume fewer calories and have less issues with obesity. And we also have to increase the intake of antigenic foods. Remember, tumors can only spread if they're able to lay down new blood vessels. And if we eat foods that prevent angiogenesis, then we're not going to have spread of any cancer cells that are in our system. Pro-inflammatory foods, added sugars, 4 grams of a teaspoon. And you really should limit to absolutely no more than 10 grams and probably less. Trans fats, they're in a lot of foods that people think of as healthy. Granola bars, Special K, cookies, excess omega-6 fatty acids. Oils are very high in omega-6 fatty acids. Refined carbohydrates, white bread, bagels, pizza dough, donuts, white rice, processed meats, no more bologna. Advanced glycation end products, that's high heat cooking of foods, heme iron and red meat. On the other hand, the foods that we should be eating are anti-inflammatory. Foods high in omega-3 fatty acids, nuts, leafy greens, flax. Foods that are high in antioxidants, tomatoes, green tea, cruciferous vegetables, mushrooms, fermented foods, onions, foods rich in polyphenols, 100% cocoa, cytokine reducers. Cytokine is one of the inflammatory chemicals. released in chronic inflammation. Garlic actually reduces cytokines. Prebiotics and probiotics, which feed our intestinal bacteria, which then produce the anti-inflammatory short chain fatty acids. Additional considerations, you do want to decrease saturated fat. Mostly only comes to you from animal protein, but a lot of people think of coconut oil as very healthy, but it's very high in saturated fat. Avoid the added sugars, and you can see that on the nutrition label, which we'll look at later as added sugars. Avoid expelled oils to avoid endothelial dysfunction, including the plant-based oils, coconut, palm, EVOO. You can cook with water, broth, beer, or wine, but you have to watch for the hidden oils on any listing of ingredients. Increase your antioxidants, flavonoids from plants, berries, tree nuts, tree fruits, nuts and beans, vegetables, spices. 40 plus grams of fiber per day comes from unprocessed carbohydrates, legumes, fruits, vegetables. Anti-angiogenic foods, fruit, cruciferous vegetables, mushrooms, tomato, garlic, soybeans. Pre and probiotics, garlic, onion, leeks, grains, anything fermented. You don't need to take a tablet for that. You can get your pre and probiotics from food. So reviewing and going back to vascular disease, atherosclerosis, what are the foods that cause atherosclerosis? Excess fats, pro-inflammatory foods, elevated LDL cholesterol. You're only going to get that from animal protein, including eggs and dairy, carnitine and choline containing foods. So a dietary approach to vascular disease, coronary artery disease, should include anything that limits fats and saturated fat intake. You eliminate processed foods, avoid the pro-inflammatory food, anything high in omega-6 fatty acids, heme iron, refined sugars. Focus on anti-inflammatory foods and foods high in antioxidants. Reduce insulin resistance. Does it work? Well, here's the results from a study done by Caldwell Esselstyn at the Cleveland Clinic. He had 198 patients that entered his program, which was a whole foods, plant-based, very low-fat program. Now, most people, a lot of physicians will say, well, patients just can't adhere to that. Well, almost 90% of his patients did adhere to that. And out of those 177 patients, 144 improved. And not only that, but out of those 144, 39 actually had reversal of their disease. 18 got worse, but compared to the non-adherent group, 62% of the non-adherent group got worse, none got better, whereas in the adherent groups, 81% got better and only 10% got worse. So besides the symptomatic improvement, there was actually anatomic improvement. Your images on the left are a heart perfusion scan. Red and yellow are good, green is not. And you could see that after the treatment, there was a restoration of improvement along the inferior and lateral aspect of the heart wall. And on angiogram, on your left, the squiggly worm-like looking structure is the coronary artery. And you can see the artery on the left prior to treatment is a little bit ratty and moth-eaten, whereas there's complete restoration of flow on the other side, on the right side after treatment. So the proof is ample that going on a diet can actually improve and in some cases reverse vascular disease. Dietary approach to cancer. Well, the most important thing to do is to reduce free radical production so that you don't have mutations. So anything that will decrease inflammation is good, but you should also supplement with antioxidants, berries, tree fruits, nuts and beans, vegetables, spices. And if a mutation does escape, you don't want it to grow. Anything that makes mutations grow, we call it a tumor promoter, is the same thing that might make normal cells grow. For instance, estrogens make young girls become women, testosterone make young boys become man, produce a lot of growth, and they can stimulate cancer cells as well. And we know that estrogen levels rise with increased animal protein consumption. American women have some of the highest estrogen levels in the world. Testosterone goes up with higher milk consumption. Casein in dairy products is also a tumor promoter, which was very nicely demonstrated by Dr. Campbell in his study with rats. And you want to eat foods that reduce the ability of any of these cells to lay down blood vessels. Now, there's a couple other things that we need to discuss. I've mentioned the bacteria in the intestine, what we call the gut microbiome. Having healthy bacteria within the gut relies on fiber, and the combination of the two help maintain the integrity of the intestinal lining so that you don't get a leaky gut or entry of toxins. And you also want to make sure that you have the right bacteria living in your intestine. And that all depends upon the ingestion of fiber, prebiotics, and probiotics. Eating the wrong foods leads to the wrong bacteria. If you eat a lot of red meat, you get carnitine-loving bacteria, and then you end up with the trimethylamine, which feeds into atherosclerosis. And even artificial sweeteners like trehalose, you can develop a type of bacteria called Clostridium difficile, which makes patients very sick. And also, the right intestinal bacteria produce the short-chain fatty acids, which act as an anti-inflammatory. So constructing a nutritional plan, this is redundant a little bit, I know, but we need to decrease our intake of fat, especially saturated fat, which comes from animal protein, dairy, and eggs. We have to avoid pro-inflammatory foods, the heme iron and red meat, baked goods, refined sugars. We have to increase our intake of anti-inflammatory foods, and we have to increase our intake of fiber, which comes from unrefined carbohydrates, beans, legumes, fruits, vegetables, prebiotics, and probiotics. We have to counter free radicals, so more antioxidants. And the cruciferous vegetables in particular are very good because they are actually anti-carcinogenic should a mutation or two escape from detection. We want to decrease our tumor promoters, and we want to decrease tumor progression, which are the anti-angiogenic foods, soy, garlic, red grapes, tomatoes, green tea. And the thing that's kind of interesting is that oftentimes after breast cancer, women would be prescribed tamoxifen. Tamoxifen is an anti-angiogenic drug, and actually soy and garlic are as anti-angiogenic as tamoxifen. And you want to avoid high caloric density foods, meat, oils, refined carbohydrates, dairy. So what kind of diet is that? Well, that would be what we call a whole food plant-based diet. It focuses on 4 food groups: beans, grains, fruits, and vegetables. Minimizes, or actually even better, eliminates processed foods, refined sugars, and all animal protein. And you don't have to worry. It provides all the essential and non-essential amino acids that the body needs. It's anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, anti-carcinogenic. It's definitely low in fat and high in fiber. You know, we talk about processed and unprocessed grains. And if you look at a grain, the grain is made up of 3 things. The bran, which is the outer coating, which protects the seed, the germ, which is nourishment for the seed, and then the endosperm, which is energy for the seed. When grains are refined, the bran is removed as well as the germ, and the only thing that's left is the endosperm. So a refined grain loses its fiber, it's B vitamins, it's vitamin E, it's minerals, and it's phytochemicals, the chemicals that plants use to fight foreign invaders and that are important for us. And so all the good stuff is removed. And the reason it's removed is that there's no shelf life if you leave the germ and the bran. The product will go rancid. So industry has removed all the good stuff just so that they can sell you a product that doesn't go rancid. How do you know if it's a whole grain? Well, that's a long story. And so a lot of things that sound good, bran, multigrain, organic, wheat flour, wheat germ, they're probably not whole grain. Whereas on the right side, these things are all likely whole grain. We know quinoa is, rye, anything stone ground whole, wild rice, bulgur, barley, these things are whole grains. Another quick point about eating plants rather than animals. If you look at the vegetable to animal protein intake ratio, the higher the ingestion of vegetable protein relative to animal protein. So say your ratio is 5.0, your hip fracture incidence from osteoporosis is almost zero. However, if you have a ratio of 1-to-1, animal to vegetable to animal protein intake, you have a very, very high incidence of osteoporosis and hip fracture. So eating plants is good for your bones. The other thing it's good for is for fighting obesity. I believe this is Chef AJ's chart. Sorry, Chef. I still you.
Thank you.
But I think the thing that's, I think the thing that most people don't recognize is that you got to eat enough food in a meal to feel full. And you may have to eat a pound to pound and a half of food to feel full so that you're done with eating. Most diets fail because people are hungry, and the beauty of eating foods under the green line, vegetables, fruits, unprocessed carbohydrates, is that you can eat a lot of this and you will definitely feel full. If you, on the other hand, I think protein, animal protein falls into the 1,200 to 1,800 calorie. If you're going to eat, a big piece of animal protein, you're going to exceed your caloric requirements just by eating that. And then if you add some oil to it, look how dense oil is. Oil is 4,000 calories per pound. Meat is around 1,500 calories per pound. Now, there are some healthy foods on the right side of the vertical red line that are good for you, but they're also very calorically dense. So you have to limit the intake. Avocados, nuts, seeds, nut butters, tahini. And it kind of looks like this. So I borrowed this from Forks Over Knives. You have to fill your stomach, with food to feel full. 500 calories. If you're a 5'10" male, you probably need about 1,800 calories a day. So that means you need about 600 calories per meal. If you're eating meat, you barely fill your stomach half full. You're going to be hungry. There's no way that you're going to be able to sustain that. But once you start adding fruits and veggies, potatoes and rice, you can definitely fill your stomach, feel sated, and you'll have success in losing weight. Principles of caloric density. When hungry, eat until comfortable. Don't starve or stuff. Sequence your meals. Start with low density foods first. Best not to drink your calories, although if you want to start with a nice vegetable broth or miso broth, that's probably not bad. Dilution is your solution. Fill half the plate with whole grains, starchy vegetables and or legumes, and the other half with vegetables and fruit. Be aware of the impact of vegetables versus oil. Vegetables lower your caloric density. Oils and fats raise it. Limit high caloric density foods, dried foods, nuts, high fat plant foods. When we have Mexican food, we do like guacamole, but we substitute mashed peas for half the avocado. You can't really tell. It reduces the caloric density, and we get a whole bunch of fiber and protein out of the peas. When we have pasta, we replace half of the pasta with spiralized zucchini. You can't tell once the marinara sauce is on there. Now, there are other diets that people ask about. The Mediterranean diet is a fairly decent diet, but most people who say they follow it don't really follow it. And the emphasis is on fruits, vegetables, and grains. Where have we heard that before? Oh, yes, a plant-based diet. Healthy fats only, but must limit nuts only 3 times per week. And they talk about olive oil as potentially healthy, but in the Mediterranean diet, it's really only a sprinkling, less than a tablespoon per day. Moderate dairy, only 3 servings of yogurt or cheese per week. No red meat, 3 3-ounce servings white meat or fatty fish. They avoid refined grains, other refined oils, added sugars, processed meats, and foods. It's a fairly decent diet. I don't think I need the 3-ounce servings of white meat or fatty fish. And in our house, we don't do dairy or cheese. Other low animal protein diets, vegan is no animal products, but there's no emphasis on good stuff. They don't talk about removing grains, oils, or other processed foods, fruit and vegetable ingestion, not stressed. And there's a lot of vegan foods that are unhealthy. In fact, it's interesting. That's one of the more frequent questions that I get is, why are there so many obese vegans? Well, refined sugar is vegan, and same with vegetarian, which is vegan plus dairy products and eggs. There's a lot of low carb diets, and it's interesting because they do recognize the role of insulin resistance and try to lower insulin by restricting carbohydrate intake. However, most low carb diets do increase LDL and decrease endothelial function, and there's decreased longevity. Anytime you decrease your carbohydrate ingestion to less than 40%, there is increased mortality. And I think one of the failures is that a lot of people like to blame carbs for everything, and they always say, well, a carb is a carb. Well, no, that's not really true. A refined carb is significantly different than a whole unrefined carb. And there's the issue of glycemic index, how quickly a carbohydrate raises your blood sugar. And certainly if you think of 5 apples, which is what it takes to make a cup of apple juice, the 5 apples, if you eat those, that's certainly a lot healthier than drinking a cup of apple juice. Paleo, well, it's good that they stress fruits, nuts, vegetables. They eliminate high fat and ultra processed foods. But again, carbohydrates are limited to 20%, and we already have seen that mortality rates go up. There's no whole grains, no legumes. LDL and cardiovascular disease risk go up. Testosterone goes down in men. There's increased prematurity and preeclampsia in pregnancy. Keto, the good is they avoid chips, crackers, added sugar, juice, cereal, milk, and cake. It is therapeutic in children with intractable epilepsy, but that's really probably the only people who should do keto. Again, carbohydrates are limited. Cardiovascular disease goes up. All-cause mortality goes up. Exercise performance is impaired. And there's a lot of bad side effects. So this is what the nutrition label looks like. Now, I don't call it a nutrition label. I call it a warning label. There's never a nutrition label on broccoli. It doesn't need one. It's all good food. But I want to point out on this nutrition label, here's added sugars. This happens to be a muffin mix, which I'm sure a lot of people buy, but per baked portion, and that's 2 muffins. So in 2 muffins, there's 23 grams of added sugar. So divide 23 by 4, and you essentially get 5 3/4 teaspoons. 5 3/4 teaspoons. Who would voluntarily put that much stuff in a mix to make muffins? It's just insane. And you know that most of this sugar is going to go right to the liver, and it's going to be converted to free fatty acids. It's going to obstruct your cells from being able to respond to insulin. It's going to increase your chances of insulin resistance. This is poison. Now, there's a lot of people on the internet that are hawking things, and there's a lot of fake news. I noticed one now. They've said there's a thing circulating on Facebook that if you eat CBD gummies, it'll resolve your hypertension and clear your arteries of vascular disease in 10 days. And they've co-opted pictures of Sanjay Gupta, who I'm sure never in his life would ever recommend having CBD gummies to treat your disease. But there are reliable sources of nutrition. I like PCRM.org and nutritionfacts.org. Forksoverknives.com is great. You know, you can sign up for free emails from all of these people. Forks Over Knives gives you a lot of recipes, some good, some not so good, but you know, you get to try different things that sound good, and you do find good recipes. Names you can trust: the Esselstyns, T. Colin Campbell, Neil Bernard, Mike Greger, Marion Nestle, Brenda Davis, Chef AJ, your host, Juliana Heaver, Robert Lustig, Dean Ornish, the Plantrition Project, the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, movies, Game Changers, Forks Over Knives, What the Health. These are all people that will tell you the truth about what to eat and what's going on in the world of science, nutrition science. Now, I do want to kind of end by giving you a case presentation, and to fully disclose all information. This is me, and there was a time when I weighed quite a bit, and I was about 60. And I decided to follow the advice that I gave my patients, and that was to do my lipid panel. So this is about 15 years ago. And I go, whoa, the cholesterol and LDL are kind of high. So I went to see a physician who led our PHASE program, which stands for Prevent Heart Attacks and Strokes Every Day. And, you know, he said, well, you should be on a cholesterol medication. And I go, well, how about diet and exercise? And he says, okay, you can do that, but, you know, come back in a month and I'll put you on meds. So I did try that, and it was a real struggle. And I did lose some weight, and it did drop my cholesterol a little bit, but the LDL was still very high. And unbeknownst to me, he snuck in a blood sugar, and voila, I've got diabetes. So now I came in and I agreed to the statin, but he wanted to put me on a diabetes med, and I said, no, I'll keep working on diet and exercise. So I did that. I struggled some more. The statin worked for my cholesterol, and losing a few more pounds helped with the sugar. So I decided I'd continue on that particular way of eating and exercising. But something happened in the meantime. I had a couple of episodes of weird feelings in my chest, and I ended up having a 6-vessel coronary artery bypass surgery. Now, when I got home, one of my buddies sent me a couple of books in the mail. One was The China Study by T. Colin Campbell, and the other one, Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease by Caldwell Esselstyn. And I literally, took these to heart, and I went on the Esselstyn program. And it was incredible to me that weight melted off, blood sugar normalized, goodbye diabetes, and my cholesterol level just plummeted. I cut my cholesterol pill in half, stayed the course, and despite taking only half of the cholesterol medication, my level went even lower. And so I stopped that. And even with no statin, my cholesterol stayed at 121 with an HDL of 50 and an LDL of 57, and my blood sugar stayed normal. So there's proof in the literature that diet works for the diseases that are our biggest killers. And it's certainly is proof in my own particular life that changing a lifestyle is helpful. And I might point out that one of the first speakers that we heard after converting was Chef AJ, I think, at one of the first Sacramento Veg Fests down on Del Paso Boulevard. That was actually our first book that we bought too, unprocessed.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So, at any rate, if somebody tells you, mammals are supposed to eat animal protein, not true. There are some mammals that are quite satisfied to eat, vegetables and grains, and they do quite well and they thrive. And it would be very, very interesting that if you changed your lifestyle, you could go to your doctor and they might have to tell you this: stop eating so many vegetables. I can't seem to find anything wrong with you. Wouldn't that be nice? So, at any rate, I appreciate you listening to me. I told you a lot of stuff. This is stuff I tell the medical students. So some of it may be a little bit technical, but if you have interest, my wife and I did write a book called Bypass: The Journey to Better Health, which outlines a lot of this. And, it does review a lot of the things that I just talked about. So thank you very much for the privilege of your time. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Dr. Klonecke. You can stop sharing screen now, and there's some questions in the chat we can answer, and let's talk about your book. The first thing I want to know is, who was the friend that sent you the books after your bypass surgery?
He was a podiatrist that I worked with, Milt Fredenberg.
That's and he's plant-based himself, huh?
Pretty much so, yeah. And and I think what that tells you, it tells you the power of one. One person can make an effect in someone else's life. And I think actually in the foreword to the book, I do thank two people: him for sending me the books, and Kathy for going along on the trip and all the great recipes that she's done over the years. So.
Well, it is so much easier when the family or the spouse, supports the person, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's good to have a team. I mean, if your family won't support you, find another team. I mean, don't leave them, but I mean, you can partner up with other people, and that makes it a lot easier. You can share duties and recipes, et cetera, et cetera.
How often do you speak at the medical school, and do you always give this presentation, or do you do other presentations? And how successful has that been about getting medical students inspired to learn about plant-based diets?
That's a $64 million question. I usually, I only give 2 lectures on nutrition, which is 2 more than I got when I went to medical school. And I actually do another lecture on finances, but judging by the questions that I get in the hallway and the number of people asking the questions after the lecture, it's a minority, but it's a good minority, and these people they're cognizant and they want to know more, and so hopefully it's just a start for them. I feel like I should have at least a whole morning, if not a whole day, but I'm grateful for the 2 hours.
How often do you go?
Once a semester.
Oh, wow. That's nice. Yeah, one of the live viewers says, I'm always interested in what each expert would say is the one single choice we can make to start improving your health. That's actually kind of a great question. Like, if somebody's not willing to do everything we say right away, what's the one thing you would tell them to do and to do first?
Eat real food. I mean, I think actually I start one of my chapters that way. I guess the thing is, make sure that you get at least 50 grams of fiber from food in your diet every day. And that actually means you would have to eat real food, because you can't eat all this processed food. There's no fiber in it. And you can't eat all this animal protein. There's no fiber in that either. There's no fiber in milk. There's no fiber in dairy. Most of the food that gets eaten has no fiber in it. So if you focus on getting your fiber, because I think that the the health of your health is so dependent on what bacteria live in your intestines, and making sure that you have good bacteria requires that you eat fiber. And once you have the fiber, you've got the right bacteria, you've got protection from toxins, you've got protection from bacteria, you're making short chain fatty acids, which are anti-inflammatory. There's nothing bad you can say about it.
Mm. Yeah, you wonder people like doing these carnivore diets, how are they pooping? I mean, there's no fiber in any animal products at all, you know?
I know.
Just
Well, and the other thing too is that there's an odor. The more animal protein you eat, there's an odor because a lot of the amino acids have sulfur, and now you're emitting hydrogen sulfide, whereas that's not the case with plant protein and plant foods.
that's why cat poop smells worse than dog poop.
Correct.
Oh, that's funny. So one of the viewers is saying the body producing new blood vessels isn't necessarily a good thing.
Well, I think that the thing that you don't want to do is you don't want mutated cells to be producing blood vessels, because that's how you get metastatic cancers. A mutated cell can't survive if it can't establish a blood vessel. And yes, there's some neoangiogenesis is required normally, but we don't want to allow it to be unlimited.
Got it. Thank you. Bit is asking, to minimize cancer risk, should we limit beans to 1 cup a day, or should we keep total calories from protein under a certain percentage? Pritikin said 13%. What are the current thoughts?
Yeah, well, I don't know that there's ever been a study absolutely on that. I know that T. Colin Campbell found that when animal protein was increased to 20% of the diet, that then provided a stimulus for cancer cells to grow. Whereas if you increased plant protein to 20%, cancer cells did not grow. You can calculate how much protein you need. The formula is 0.8 milligrams per kilogram of ideal body weight. So I think a 170-pound man, don't quote me exactly on this, but I think I calculated once, it was about 55 to 60 grams of protein. And you want to make sure that that's mostly plant protein.
Yeah, thank you. Here's a funny question. What is Dr. Klonecke? Yeah, I don't, there's so many ways to answer. I'm guessing they're asking what your medical specialty is my guess, right?
Oh,
When you think,
well, I've had many over the years. I was board certified in family practice, nuclear medicine, and lifestyle medicine. I don't know if that helps.
nice. Okay, I saw.
Most of the time I did nuclear medicine, but I would have to say that the thing that I'm most passionate about is lifestyle medicine, because I think our job as physicians should be to help patients get well, not just to patch them along the road of more and more care.
If you had this information in medical school, do you think you might have chosen another specialty?
No, but I don't think I would have needed a bypass, and I don't think I would have.
Yeah,
I don't
your
think
life.
I would have
Yeah.
never been obese, and I would have never had diabetes.
I mean, that operation is not like getting your teeth cleaned. That's a big operation. Like, how long did it take you to recover? And I'm guessing it was pretty painful, right? Afterwards?
Yeah, no, the recovery wasn't bad, but the thing is that going into it, and I think I mentioned it in the book, is that you get informed consent before surgery, and I was impressed by the number of ways I could die, undergoing a surgery that was supposed to help me.
It's something. Lissa says this was a very nice presentation. We're talking today to Dr. Andrew Klonecke about his new book, Bypass, and his journey of having bypass surgery and then becoming plant-based. So I saw a really interesting, Alyssa saying it's a wonderful presentation, and Susanna saying we need more doctors like Dr. Klonecke to give these types of presentations to medical school. So one of the viewers is saying, what are your thoughts on statins since you have had bypass surgery, but you also eat whole food plant-based?
Well, it's interesting. I did a video for the cardiac rehab program at Kaiser, and I guess I remember they came to the house and they actually took a video of Kathy and I cooking, and the videographer stayed for dinner, and they show that. So I was kind of surprised, but and I've gotten feedback, on the video. I talk about stopping my statin, and apparently, I guess the powers that be didn't like that, but I think the problem is with cholesterol. I don't see. I think we've simplified the problem. We've oversimplified the problem. We go, oh, your cholesterol's too high. You're going to have heart disease. So we're going to lower your cholesterol, and you're going to have less heart disease. Well, cholesterol is one of the factors, but there's so many other factors: the inflammation, the TMAO, and I think that cholesterol is only a yardstick. It's a measure that indicates we're eating a lousy diet, and so I think it's a surrogate for all these other things, the inflammation and the TMAO, and we're not eliminating those by going on statins. I think Esselstyn says you're vascular disease free if your cholesterol is less than 150 and your LDL less than 80. If my levels had not gone to below those numbers with diet, I probably would have stayed on statin, but it's irrelevant. Why would I need the statin? So I think we're misleading people by prescribing the statins only and not changing diets, because there's a lot of other factors that are not going to be resolved by statins. That's my gripe. It's an easy fix that doesn't take care of the whole problem. And I think at this point in my life, if you're a physician and someone's got a high cholesterol and you're not counseling them on diet and you're only handing them a statin, I think you're committing malpractice. I think you're not telling the patient the truth. And so I'll tell you one quick story. At my last year at Kaiser, I was able to convince administration to have a whole foods, plant-based lifestyle type program for patients with chronic disease. One of the people who signed up was this young fella who had a hereditary high cholesterol. It was almost 400. And the only thing that lowered his cholesterol was this new medication, which also caused severe angioedema, which is an allergic reaction. So whenever he'd end up in the emergency room, so he decided to do something else. So he went on the whole foods plant-based diet, and in the 8 weeks of the program, he dropped his cholesterol from 360 down to 170 with diet, not with a drug that caused him to have an allergic reaction. I mean, it's incredible. So
That's amazing. Wow. How's he doing now? Or you don't know?
well, it's been 4 years, so hopefully well.
So one of the viewers is saying, in your presentation, you noted nuts, but some of your slides highlighted Dr. Esselstyn. What are your thoughts on nuts?
I think, yeah, it's kind of interesting. Esselstyn once stayed at the house, and I made him oatmeal, and he said to me, "Do you have any nuts?" And I go, "What are you talking about? You said no nuts." And he goes, "Well, I have to say no nuts because people can't stay within the recommended amount. Like serving of walnuts is a quarter cup." He says the problem with nuts is that people buy a can and they eat them things all day long, et cetera, et cetera. So we do have nuts. I have 2 Brazil nuts a day, and occasionally I'll add an eighth of a cup of chopped walnuts to my oatmeal. So I think nuts are probably, my opinion is that nuts are okay as long as they're eaten in limited quantities. And you have to adhere to, what is the recommended amount, Now,
Yeah.
most things in the calorie density chart, anything on the left side, below the green, to the left of the right, you don't have to measure that stuff.
Correct.
You can't, but avocado, a serving of avocado is 1/5 of the avocado. You can't have the whole thing, and
Yeah.
nuts, there's serving sizes, you could a quarter cup at most, so and there's good stuff in there. But you don't want to take more than a quarter cup because you're going to get A, too many calories, and B, too much fat.
Yeah, right.
I don't know. Hopefully that answers the question.
I noticed in your book you have some recipes, but you don't have your famous muffins.
Oh no. Oh
I
shoot.
don't.
Well, they're on Kathy's website. She's got it.
Nice. And they're also on my YouTube channel.
Yes.
Dixie, what did you say was it that helped to cause preeclampsia in pregnancy?
I think that was one of the low carb diets, keto diets,
Okay.
so I think
Okay.
I
Oh,
think
yeah. Thank you for coming back, Karen, because on the last show, which was a cooking demo, she asked a medical question. I said, I can't answer, but we have a doctor coming on at 11 that could. So she wants to know how much additional warfarin would you have to eat to be able to eat a lot more green vegetables while on warfarin? That's a blood thinner, right?
oh boy. Uh that's unfortunately not my area of expertise. I do know that there's some foods that interfere, but that's I'm sorry I can't answer that question for you.
I'm trying to think who's coming on. Do you think Dr. McDougall could answer it? He's coming on
He
Monday.
might, yeah.
Thanks. And
He might.
speaking of McDougall, there's a question from Julie. Did you ever go on one of his adventure trips?
Well, I don't know what his adventure trips are, but I did take his course in Santa Rosa, which I found interesting.
He used to take people to Costa Rica.
Oh no, I didn't go with him on that. Yeah, no. I just did
Okay.
his course in Santa Rosa. And it was kind of interesting because I sat next to Neil Bernard. I remember looking at him going, what the hell are you doing here? Don't you?
That is so fun. I know. I just, Dr. McDougall doesn't live in, now that I'm closer, he doesn't live in Santa Rosa anymore, but that would be so cool to take an
Where
in-person
does he
class.
live? Did he move to
He
Portland?
moved right out, he lost everything in the fire, which I think was at 2016. And so he lives in Portland near his son, Craig.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's
I was sad that he left Kaiser Portland.
Yeah, he was great. So, everybody, not everybody, but almost everybody that comes on the show gets asked, what do you eat in a day and what do you do for exercise question? That's always a good way to wrap up because it's
Oh, okay.
usually
Yeah. Well,
inspiring.
uh, I like making my own bread. It's mostly I get whole grain wheats and grind them in my Vitamix. Uh, and there's actually a couple walnuts in there. So I'll start the day with a toast with a little bit of nut butter and sliced bananas. And depending on what time I get up, I might have some oatmeal later. Lunchtime is often leftovers. We might have bean chili. Um, I make a vegan masaka with eggplant and yellow potatoes.
Well, wait a
Um,
minute, then why can't you come to one of our potlucks and bring that? That sounds
I
delicious.
I could.
That
Well,
sounds
I mean,
amazing.
yeah. Dinner we have kind of a stable of meals. We do our own veggie burgers on and eat them on lettuce. Um, I shouldn't tell her too much. I should make her buy my book because I tell them in the book.
Okay. And your book
But
is also on Audible, isn't it?
yes, right. And it's fairly inexpensive. I think the print copy is $9.99 and the Kindle copy is $2.99. But we have a stable of recipes that we really like. I like doing a red pepper, mushroom, tofu curry. I like doing the masaka. I have a eggplant not eggplant, but broccoli, tofu, stir fry. Kathy has a great squash black bean casserole. Wonderful. Oh, adapted from Unprocessed, your book, a lentil meatloaf, which is
Yum.
awesome. So, and then we'll occasionally take a foray. Like last night, we had portobello Rubens with a cashew-based horseradish sauce and kimchi on thin wheat bread. And that came out of a cookbook called Love and Lemons, which we like. But, a lot of cookbooks, if they have good recipes, they'll usually include oil. We just omit it. And it's amazing. I don't know where people got the idea that oil was so necessary anyhow, because most of the time you omit it and it's like, didn't know it was gone.
Yeah, it's just, I used to, I don't teach in-person cooking anymore, but I used to make a soup. It's a popular recipe of mine called nutrient-rich black bean soup, where I would do that obligatory step.
Yum, yum.
You saute the onion and the garlic in like 4 tablespoons of olive oil, which is a way a lot of recipes start. And I'd make it the other way. And either people couldn't tell the difference or they'd pick the one without oil as tasting better. So, when you use oil, you got to use a lot more salt. I love how Dr. Wes Youngberg says oil is a triumph of marketing over science. And if there's anything healthy in the oil, eat the olive or eat the flaxseed, but
right. Yeah.
it's
No,
hard.
yeah.
Mhm.
I think one thing that I didn't mention, which I think is critical, is that once you eliminate all that oil and the fat and sugar, you wake up your taste buds. It drives me crazy when I go to Trader Joe's because they have a lot of frozen items that I look at and I go, oh wow, this sounds really good. Now I'll look at the back and it's got like 1,500 grams of sodium, and I go, not for me. These things go, like salt goes straight to your brain, and that's all you taste. Then you don't taste anything else. And the other thing that I found kind of interesting is that high salt in processed foods is designed to cover up WUF, which stands for warmed up flavor. Without the salt, it would taste terrible. So put the salt in there to hide it, and that's all you're tasting. So once you eliminate the salts and the oils from your diet, your taste buds all of a sudden recognize flavor. I mean, whoever thought cauliflower had flavor? But it's not until you eliminate all the bad stuff that you recognize that. Broccoli tastes good, cauliflower tastes good. And I think for us, that was the big aha moment, was that we just felt better. And we go, wow, this that and the blood test results were enough to keep us going. I mean, we don't want to go there,
Did you ever talk to your bypass surgeon or any of the doctors that treated you for heart disease and tell them what you're up to now?
No, I never did. My surgeon was a fine fella, and I think I mentioned in the book that he had just climbed Everest, so I figured he'd be good. He'd make it all the way through my surgery. But I think the thing that in the forward to the book I write that I part of the reason I wrote the book was that I was angry that I did not have the information that could have kept me from having bypass surgery. And so I felt like all my doctors, I felt like they were really good doctors, but to a certain extent, the fact that they didn't know, I'm going to say that they didn't know, because if they did know and they didn't tell me, that would have been malpractice. I'm going to assume that they didn't know. And so that's my mission now, is to let people know that this information is out there. It's been out there forever. It's been out there for 30 years, I mean, Nathan Pritkin started it, he didn't have all the science, but, he recognized the importance of food.
Didn't Dr. McDougall have some law that at least the doctor has to tell you? Did that law ever get passed? AB something or other?
I'm not aware that it did, but yes, that should be the situation. But then when you think about it, like these poor medical students down in Elk Grove, they're getting 2 hours of nutrition lecture in 4 years. Granted, that's two more than I had, but how much good is that going to do? That's just, like, you go into the ocean and all they did to do is put in your toe and then you kind of leave, I mean, you don't get into the in depth of it all. I'm only hoping that when I tell them stuff that piques their interest enough that they go further. I mean, this book that I was telling you about earlier by Shelpa Rovella, Silent Fire, it's incredible. Did you ever have Robert Lustig on?
One time, yep, right, one time.
He wrote a great book too called Metabolical.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really a great book. I mean, there's people that know the stuff and try to tell everybody, but it's sort of like my oldest son when he was 5. I said, Christopher, can I tell you something? He goes, no, Dad, I don't want to know the truth.
That's funny. That's why people don't want to know a lot of time about diet, because then they might have to change what they're doing and they don't want to.
Right. I get it. I get it that people are worried about time. But you get good at this after a while and you learn shortcuts, and it doesn't take as much time as you think once you get into it. And by the way, it's 30% cheaper than eating the other way. I mean, people complained about how much meat went up last year. I'm just at home laughing and go, well, beans are still 97 cents a pound.
Yeah, and sometimes cheaper. I've seen them for 50 cents a pound, depending on where you shop. So
I know. It's just absolutely crazy. So anyway, yeah, it's too bad. I mean, and also, those OECD statistics about how unhealthy we are in America. I mean, we just went to Japan, and it was extremely noticeable how, I mean, besides the fact that they're extremely polite and that there was no garbage on the street, there was no obesity. It was rare to see someone who looked like they were overweight. Yeah. But you go to the mall here and it's like, one after the other.
And let's point out that they eat rice and it's white.
That's true. That is amazing. But they also eat a lot of vegetables.
Yep.
And if they do eat animal protein, it's a condiment. It's not a
right. And even their oil use, from what I understand from my Japanese friends, even though they use it, it's not excessive like it is here.
Yeah. Well, I think like the Mediterranean diet, I mean, I had a friend that underwent bypass, and he drank a cup of olive oil every day because he heard it was cardio.
But how was he overweight? That's so many calories.
I know, no. Yeah, because he heard it was, heart healthy. I mean, they've done a great job.
How could you would gag on that? I can't imagine. I mean, you would gag.
Yeah. So
does he still do that?
No, we had a talk. But I mean, the real Mediterranean diet, their heart healthiness is not because they eat olive oil. I mean, they use very little olive oil, at all. It's because they're eating fruits, vegetables, and whole grains. By the way, Dan Buettner's book, the Blue Zones, I think the commonality of food was lentils.
Yeah. So it's not because of the olive oil, it's in spite of the olive oil. One of the viewers says, why do you eat 2 Brazil nuts a day? Is it for health reasons?
Oh, it's probably a Gregor thing. It's selenium. You're supposed to get some that has selenium in it, and I can't remember even what it's for, but yeah. I get hungry at mid-morning, so I'll have a medjool date and 2 Brazil nuts, which probably
such discipline.
Well, I mean, it's sort of like, I don't know that does anything for my hunger other than psychologically, because it's certainly not calorically dense, that's for sure.
So there's a question. Do you have any insight on CKD and recovering kidney function? Just so you know, Dr. McDougall has done several lectures on this channel about that, but Dr. Klonecke.
Yeah, right. Well, when I think about that question, I think about who is this guy? The first guy, Kempner, Dr. Kempner, he treated malignant hypertension. This is 30, 40 years ago. He would treat it with the rice diet. Have you ever heard of that?
I've
That-
I had two of his doctors that work with Kempner,
yeah,
Dr. Clarence Grimm and Dr. Francis Neelan. They both worked for him at Duke, and they both have been on the show. Yep,
yeah. Did they talk about the rice diet? I mean, it's
absolutely.
that they had people. This was before we had medication for high blood pressure, hypertension, and people who developed malignant hypertension, where they had kidney failure, eye problems, and just pressures out like sky high. He treated them with the rice diet. That's all they ate is rice. They had I don't know, a pound of rice 3 times a day. And 2/3 of his patients actually got better. And I think they still have a version of the Kempner diet, but it now includes grains, fruits, and vegetables. Sounds like a plant-based diet. So I don't have any specific information relative to chronic kidney disease, but I would think that a whole food plant-based diet would be pretty good. You've got less residue that you have to take care of, kidney-wise filtration, and it should be beneficial for you.
But so what diet, a meat-based diet's not going to help it, right? So,
Right.
so it's interesting. So Clark says, what do you think of potassium chloride salt substitute? It's the only salt substitute we can get in Australia.
Oh my gosh.
Have you tried it?
No. Well, maybe many years ago, but most of our foods we don't. If we ever use salt, it's a smattering. I don't cook with salt, and Kathy doesn't cook with salt. We cook mostly with just herbs and spices: cumin, turmeric, ginger, basil, herbs de Provence, Italian seasoning. So, and we'll use pepper. So it's rare that we might say, should we put a little salt in this? I mean, it's pretty unusual to do that. So I don't think it's harmful for you. Obviously, I think the kidney handles, the body likes potassium better than sodium, and the kidneys seem to handle it better than they would sodium. So I don't think it's an issue, but I would say try some of the other herbs and spices first and see if you can't get your flavor that way.
Have you ever tried the salacious or any of the spices from local spicery? Because he's local and he comes to our meetups and they're delicious. Some of his blends.
I have. I can't tell you which offhand because you gave us a couple. And so I have used that. And they seem to say on there what to use it on, so yes.
It's yummy. He even has a bacon seasoning now and a pepperoni. So they're really good. If you come to the meetup on the 21st, if he's available, I'll try to get him to bring his wares if he's
Okay.
available.
Okay.
Sometimes he has another store in Tiburon, so sometimes he has to work, but he comes to all our conferences. He's wonderful. Well, it was so fun catching up with you, Dr. Klonecke. Oh, you didn't mention what you did for exercise and if you exercise. You a golfer?
Oh, yes. Yes. No, we 6 days a week, we do a 2.5 mile walk. And 3 days a week, I go to a local gym, Roseville Health and Wellness, for resistance kind of stuff. I do about a 40-minute workout 3 days a week there. And then we always go on our walk,
Yep, that's important. What's your favorite meal? What's your favorite restaurant up here? And we live in the same area now, although I haven't seen him in like 2 years. So we're trying to get him to come to the meetup and bring that moussaka because it sounds amazing.
Okay, I'll definitely do that. It's kind of strange. What's our favorite restaurant? I don't know. Yeah, we go out so little. I mean, we there's a Mongolian that we like. We just don't use any of their sauces, because they're loaded with sugar and oil. We like Ruin Thai, which is a Thai restaurant. I'm going to say that one of my favorite places is Salad Works because I love a salad with
and
all of those.
and you can customize. Yeah, I love that too.
Right.
The owner is now a friend of mine. Yeah, I'm sure she'd be happy
The
to hear that.
Faux Fresh is pretty good. Yeah, when we go for a fancy meal, which is rarely, we actually go to Hawks because we know the chef over there, and they'll prepare plant-based meals for us. I think we actually had our 50th wedding anniversary dinner there, and they were very good about accommodating, and they did cauliflower steaks, and yeah, I don't remember everything now, but and I think that's if you have a place you like to go, you could just as you've done, you talk with the chef, and it's kind of interesting. They actually like cooking plant-based. I mean, that's what they're trained classically. I mean, what kind of skill does it take to cook a steak? Any guy can do that in his backyard.
Exactly.
But you tell them I like a plant-based meal, I like beans, I like mushrooms, I like grains. Yeah, and all of a sudden they're going, "This is great. I can do this." We've always had great luck doing that.
Yeah, fantastic. So thank you so much, Dr. Klonecke. Congratulations on your new book, guys. You can get it at the link below. It's also available on Audible. You can watch him making muffins on the link there as well. So happy, healthy New Year, Dr. Klonecke.
Well, the same to you, Chef AJ, and I put the 21st down on my calendar here.
Right.
Hopefully we can make it. Where is it again?
It's at Meristem, and everybody's invited, by the way. If you want to come to my monthly potlucks, just join Healthy Living in Lincoln on Meetup. It's free, and we have a wonderful band coming on the 21st. It's free. You just bring a dish to share. As long as it's vegan and labeled, it doesn't have to be super strict, but most of the people are SOS free there. And we had people coming in from Fresno, Washington State, Massachusetts, just to come and see the party boys.
All right, and it's called, what is it called, the place?
Meristem. It's a school in Fair Oaks.
Okay,
and one of
good.
our members, well, Twyla, she works there, and so she was able to rent it to us. It's a beautiful location with ample parking.
Very nice.
Yeah,
Very nice.
I think you'll really like. I want to try that moussaka. So thanks so much, Dr. Klonecke.
Thank you, and say hi to Charles.
Absolutely. You say hi to Kathy, and thanks all of you for watching another episode of Chef AJ Live. Just want to remind you that the bundle book sale from my publisher ends tomorrow. You can get both books cheaper than you would separately, including free shipping in the United States, as well as many, many bonuses. And please come back at about 3 p.m. today when my guest is Al Schmidt. He reversed his heart disease, not starting this diet till he was 80, and today is his 88th birthday. Take care, everybody. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you see, maybe give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing, because Monday we have 13 hours of Chef AJ Live. I'm doing a marathon, kind of like the Twilight Zone marathon, but just to inspire you to get healthy in the new year. And if you subscribe, you get the notification anytime I go live.